Come closer, my friends. Tonight, I'm going to take you through the shadows of an ancient world, deep into the past, beyond the history we know, behind the royal palaces, cathedrals, and battlefields, into the hidden societies that formed in the darkness. You've probably heard of the Crusades. Thousands of souls from all over Europe set out on a journey filled with blood and fire to reach the Holy Lands. But the real story was shaped behind stone walls, beyond the gates of inns, and through whispers. Here, where power and mystery met, underground organizations emerged, hiding from the light of the church. This is a story where someone pulls the strings from the shadows, and loyalty and betrayal are hard to tell apart. Now, lean back in your chair, take a deep breath, and feel your soul relax. History is already starting to whisper. Listen. My friends, behind the world's greatest disasters, there's often just one idea, one call, or maybe just a few words. And so it was with the Crusades. It all began with such a call. Now, sit back and get ready to look at the smoke-filled sky of those years, because this story is long and complicated. By the late 11th century, Europe was as rich and dynamic as it was chaotic and unstable. Great castles were rising, marketplaces were bustling with life, but there was darkness in the sky. Norman knights, Frankish barons, Saxon nobles, all of them had taken up arms to defend their little worlds. There was no peace, because whoever owned the land owned the power. Feuds and inheritance disputes between noble lords seemed endless, and in the middle of all this turmoil, the church shone like a light, both a savior and a silent predator of interests. It was in such a time that Pope Urban II made a call at the Council of Clermont. History was about to hear words that would shape entire civilizations. God wills it. When the people heard these words, they gathered around this sacred call. But I ask you, my friends, was this truly God's will, or was it a plan made for greed and power? Consider the socio-political structure of society. On one side, there were serfs bound to the land, working the fields, serving their lords. Their lives were stuck in a cycle of poverty. But here, the Crusades seemed like a hope to change their fate. There are riches in the Holy Land, they were told. Anyone who fights in God's name will be absolved of their sins. This was a tempting promise for both the rich and the poor. On the other side, there were the knights, sworn warriors of honor and glory. But the truth was, most of them were struggling financially. What knight wouldn't want to prove himself on a journey eastward, claim new lands, and thus become a legend? Of course, there were political power games at play, too. The Byzantine Empire was being squeezed by the Seljuk Turks. Emperor Alexios Komnenos had to ask for help from Europe. But this help could be used not only to fight the Turks, but also to change the balance of power in Europe. Pope Urban knew this very well. The Crusades were the beginning of both a spiritual and earthly reckoning. And my friends, it was on such a contradictory foundation that these campaigns were built. On one side, the hope of winning heaven, on the other, the desire to conquer the world. A seemingly pure cause, but behind it, the insatiable desires of mankind. Now, think about it. In the midst of all this activity, there were people secretly organizing. Imagine the underground groups that took advantage of this chaos and helped shape the order. You'll hear their stories soon. But remember, these stories have always been written in blood and mystery. My friends, the activity sparked by the Crusades wasn't just limited to the crowds heading toward the Holy Land. In the shadow of these wars, there was a lesser-known side of history: underground organizations, a hidden order working in dark corridors, a power growing in whispers. So why was such a thing necessary? Let me take you to the beginning of this mysterious world. Europe in the 11th and 12th centuries wasn't just the world of kings and knights. In those days, every footstep echoing in the streets could signal danger. As the nobles sought to protect their lands, trade routes were being cut off by bandits, and villages were being raided by marauding bands. For the common people, this chaos had become unbearable. The church's authority was strong, yes, but only effective in certain centers. In the vast lands, law and order were almost a fantasy. These conditions created the perfect environment for new and secretive methods to develop. There are three main needs that became clear with the rise of underground organizations: security, information flow, and the preservation of religious devotion. Let's first consider security. A Crusader army was a force equipped with armor and swords, but it was also vulnerable. On long journeys, supply caravans or slow-moving civilian groups were frequently attacked. This situation required the coordination of local groups to ensure the safety of these journeys. These groups were often made up of merchants, church members, or local militias. This allowed for both physical and strategic security. However, these groups often strayed into illegal activities, looking out for their own interests as well. The flow of information was even more complicated. Winning the wars of that time wasn't just about having a strong army, it was also about relying on information obtained at the right time. Critical intelligence, such as enemy movements, allies' loyalties, and the state of trade routes, had to be gathered through secretive methods. This made underground communication networks essential. Coded messages written on paper, spies working in different regions, and even priests moving among the Crusader soldiers were all central to this information flow. This network of information sometimes covered a vast area, larger than even the Pope could reach. Finally, organizing religious devotion. Remember, my friends, the Crusades weren't just about political or military goals. They were campaigns driven by a promise of saving souls. However, as the Crusades dragged on, faith began to waver among the people. Church centers across Europe needed organized societies to prevent this spiritual fragmentation. These secret groups began to spread stories and symbols that grew in whispers to motivate the public and soldiers. Miracles told by preachers, legends of holy relics, and disguised monks. These were the tools used to maintain that chain of belief. But don't forget, my friends, these underground networks didn't always operate innocently. Power in the hands of those who wield it can be corrupting. Some of these groups quickly went astray, chasing their own agendas. Some of their leaders distorted the flow of information, turned security organizations into pirate bands, or used religious devotion for political manipulation. These organizations are now remembered in legends, but in truth they were the games of powers hidden in the shadows. Now think for a moment. Here we are, wandering in these dark corridors, moving between the whispers of shadows. Who knows what secrets we might uncover if we dig a little deeper? Ah, the Knights Templar. Just the mention of their name sends chills down the spine. A group that once embarked on a mission with the sacred purpose of religion, yet ultimately became almost a legend within the shadows. Come, my friends, let us now take a look at the early years of this mysterious order, how it was founded, and how it evolved into a dark underground network. It all started in 1119, shortly after Jerusalem was captured by the Christians. These newly acquired Holy Lands became a symbol for the Christian world of the Middle Ages. But with this victory came a problem. The roads to Jerusalem were still full of dangers. Pilgrims carrying their crosses set out to reach the holy sites, but many never completed their journey, either falling victim to bandit attacks or succumbing to hunger and disease. It was during this chaotic period that a knight named Hugues de Payens came forward with a proposal. Hugues and 8 companions swore an oath to form a vowed community to protect the pilgrims. At first glance, this seemed like a simple protection movement, but from the very beginning, there was a deeper plan at play. They defined themselves as servants of God and the Church. But my friends, history shows us that those who claim to serve God often have other goals in mind. The formal establishment of the Knights Templar was approved by King Baldwin II of Jerusalem, who granted them a headquarters on the Temple Mount in the city. This is where their name originates, the Knights of the Temple. However, this community wasn't just a group of armed guards. Their mission in the early years extended far beyond protecting pilgrims. From almost the very start, the organization functioned like an underground network. So, my friends, why an underground network? The answer lies in their organizational structure and methods of communication. The Templars worked with extraordinary discipline. In their system, each member was bound to their superiors with absolute loyalty. When an order was given, it was carried out without question. This created a vast network where each unit only knew a small part of the larger picture. Information only reached the relevant parties, ensuring security within the organization. Another key to the Templars' success was their resource management. In no time, European nobles began donating vast sums of money and land to the Templars. But this wealth wasn't only used for holy missions. It laid the foundation for a shrewdly managed network. Secret tunnels, strategic intelligence centers, and diplomatic communication centers were set up. The Knights Templar were not only an army on the battlefield, but also an army in the shadows. And this is when the true power of the Templars emerged during the Crusades. A pilgrim arriving in Jerusalem wasn't just asking for protection. They could also serve as a vessel carrying information, communicating, or expanding commercial networks under the Templars' surveillance. This is when the Templars became the hidden organization behind the military face of the Crusades. This is when the Templars became the hidden organization behind the military face of the Crusades. But my friends, pause for a moment and think. Doesn't the transformation of a group founded for a holy cause into such a powerful network make them a danger? As the Templars grew stronger, their enemies began to multiply. The influence of this underground shadow organization was felt not just in Jerusalem, but across all of Europe. Now, look at the fire in the hearth and imagine the dark tunnels of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, the encrypted messages written there, the spies moving from there. Was this merely a protection movement, or the first steps in a larger struggle for power hidden within history? To find the answer, we must dive deeper. The rituals of the Knights Templar. Just their name sends a shiver down your spine, my friends. As we wander through this dark corridor of history, we once again realize that the line between legends and reality is always blurry. The stories told about the Templars have captivated the imagination of humanity for centuries. Now, let us take a closer look at these legends and the truths hidden in their shadows. First, we must understand this. The Knights Templar were no ordinary order. They were a community that combined military power with a spiritual mission. But there was another reason they were extraordinary. They had their own rules, symbols, and ceremonies. The veil of mystery they created around themselves both fascinated some and frightened others. To join the Templars, a person had to endure a difficult process. According to legend, the initiation ceremonies were extremely secretive, and no information was leaked to the outside world. The candidate would be taught the core principles of the order. Loyalty, commitment, and sacrifice would be sworn. However, many claims have emerged throughout history regarding the nature of these rituals. Some suggest that initiates were subjected to severe trials, sometimes spiritual, sometimes physical. But what is the truth? Who can say for sure? Let us now turn to one of the most striking claims, the mysterious symbols and their sacred meanings. It is said that the Templars used a variety of non-Christian symbols. For example, a satanic figure called Baphomet is often associated with their rituals. Various sources claim that the Templars worshipped this figure and swore oaths before it. But how much of this story is true? My friends, perhaps the origin of these claims lies in the propaganda spread by the enemies of the order. Of course, some elements are too strong to be questioned. The Templars are often depicted in manuscripts bearing specific symbols. The double cross, the sword on a shield, and the red cross on a white cloak became their hallmark. However, a less-known symbol is the depiction of geometric shapes, like the pentagram in some illustrations. Was this holy or forbidden? This is exactly where the Templars managed to stay in the shadows throughout history. Another legend revolves around the Templars' ceremonial meals. Some have claimed that these meals contradicted Christianity and were part of a heretical rite. Yet the available documents suggest that these ceremonies were more about reinforcing a sense of unity and symbolizing the brotherhood oath. So who might have spread these rumors? Most likely those who feared their power and sought to discredit them. Let us not forget that as the Templars grew stronger and wealthier, their enemies also increased. King Philip IV of France was one of their greatest adversaries. To silence them, he fabricated incredible accusations, heretical rituals, devil worship, secret ceremonies. Yet these accusations have always been controversial in the eyes of historians. Still, these claims form the foundation of the Templars' trial. But for a moment, let us think. Could the Templars have actually done anything that would support these accusations? Were these rituals truly in line with their sacred mission? Or did they turn to them for their own gain? Or, my friends, have they hidden their secrets so well that today we are still unable to separate truth from fiction? Now imagine these rituals in the flames of the hearth. Picture the Templars in their white cloaks, the red cross on their chests, gathered in a dark room. Can you feel their whispered prayers and the invisible bond between them? Perhaps the true story lies within these whispers, or perhaps it rests in the depths of secrets we may never uncover. Simon took a deep breath and straightened his shoulders. His head and torso felt as if they were on fire. Ah, the Hospitallers! While they may have remained in the shadow of the Templars, they carved out their own unique path as another mysterious order. My friends, this brotherhood is known not only for its swords, but also for its healing hands. Now let us attempt to understand their entry onto the historical stage and the complex roles they played. The Hospitallers, also known as the Knights of St. John, owe their origins to the Kingdom of Jerusalem in the 11th century. When the Crusaders reached the Holy Land, they found themselves in need of an organization to protect and care for them. It was during this period that the Knights of St. John made their mark with a hospital they established in Jerusalem. Initially, their task was simple: to heal wounded Crusaders and pilgrims and provide them with a refuge. But behind this mission lay a broader vision. Over time, the order evolved beyond mere medical assistance. What began with their nursing skills soon expanded into military responsibilities. But why? Because during the Crusades, healthcare, intelligence, and strategy were tightly intertwined. The Hospitallers had discovered a way to not only heal the human body, but also improve military operations and loss of military operations, so that in all likelihood they would fight longer and harder. Before we discuss their underground operations, imagine their work on the open battlefield. In the chaotic warfare of the Middle Ages, a group of knights rushing to assist a fallen warrior, bearing the symbol of an 8-pointed white cross on a black background on their white robes. This emblem represented not only healthcare, but also dedication and faith. However, beneath this image, one could always sense that a deeper network existed. My friends, the Hospitallers were not only soldiers, but also took on roles involving effective intelligence gathering and information flow. The patients they treated were not just healed physically. They often carried vital information that served the interests of the order. It is said that the Hospitallers, with their undercover agents disguised as sick knights, could easily infiltrate enemy lines. Who'd suspect a sick knight? This charitable group thus gained crucial intelligence that would help the Crusaders achieve their objectives. The Hospitallers' greatest strength lay in their ability to create underground networks through both diplomatic and military strategies. For instance, the fortresses along the Mediterranean coast were not just defensive strongholds, they were also connected by secret tunnels and complex communication systems. Beneath a Hospitaller castle, there may have been hidden refuges where vital information could be stored and transmitted. Another remarkable aspect of their operations was the seamless integration of healthcare with military strategy. For example, the healing of an injured commander didn't just mean saving his life, it meant bringing back to life an entire army. This made the Hospitallers' presence on the battlefield indispensable to the success of the Crusades. Of course, such an influential organization had many enemies. Over time, the power and influence of the Hospitallers led many to believe that they were more than just a charitable group. Legends arose, claiming they performed secret ceremonies that involved non-Christian elements, such as magic or prophecy. But my friends, how much of these stories are true and how much is fabricated? History is full of slanders aimed at such groups. In closing, I want to emphasize the unique character of the Hospitallers. With their healing hands and warrior hearts, they became a force that shaped not only the fate of the Holy Land, but also that of Europe and the Mediterranean. Their strength came from their discipline and the resolve within them. Now, my friends, take a closer look at the hearth and imagine a hospital room, a wounded knight in bed, and a Hospitaller cloaked in black standing by. The white cross on his cloak flickers in the dim light. But is that cloak merely a symbol of healing, or does it carry with it a secret? I cannot predict your answer, but if I have helped you shed a little light on this dark past, then I am truly glad. The Black Cross Brotherhood. Their story is far more shadowed, hidden in the depths of history, a part of the past that few truly understand. My friends, even hearing of their name would be a great coincidence, for history does not write of them, and among the people they have remained nothing more than a whisper. Yet, today I will tell you of their existence and the impact they left behind. The birth of the Black Cross Brotherhood traces back to one of the most turbulent periods of the Crusades. Unlike the well-known Templars or Hospitallers, this order did not emerge with formal approval, but instead, as a byproduct of political chaos and security vulnerabilities, it silently grew in the shadows. Along the roads to Jerusalem, many Crusaders found themselves surrounded by dangers. Robberies, murders, lost goods. This situation put the official order of war in a precarious state. Yet it offered an opportunity for those waiting in the shadows to carve out their own place. Legend has it that the Black Cross Brotherhood was born out of a network of European nobles, merchants, and mercenaries. While they claimed to fight in the name of Christianity, their true aims were far different: to protect their own interests and maintain control over trade routes between Europe and the Holy Land. The fact that people referred to them as a brotherhood is, to me, an irony, for their activities were not about justice, but rather tools of power, wealth, and fear. My friends, have you ever wondered why they chose the name Black Cross? The Black Cross symbolized that they were connected more to punishment and death than faith. Over time, this symbol became associated with dark deeds. They established an extensive network stretching from Europe to the Holy Land. But remember, this network was not just for protecting pilgrims. It was designed to gather intelligence, control trade routes, and eliminate opponents when necessary. It is said that the members of the Black Cross Brotherhood would collect heavy taxes from the local populations under the guise of securing caravans, track groups they deemed enemies, and eliminate them through various schemes. But their role was not limited to material gain. This brotherhood soon specialized in espionage and information warfare. Each member had a unique role. Some gathered information among passing merchants, others watched suspects along the pilgrimage routes, and some manipulated agreements with rival groups. But the true influence of the Black Cross Brotherhood lay not in the visible, but in the shadows. They made secret agreements with high-ranking individuals in European courts and shaped the Crusades' objectives to suit their own ends. With the intelligence they gathered, they would misdirect armies, expose vulnerabilities, or sow discord among rival powers. So, my friends, how did they wield such power? Rumors and fear. One tale claims that the Black Cross Brotherhood accepted new members only through a ceremonial oath held at night. During this ceremony, members would gather in the middle of a caravan, place their hands on a black cross on the ground, and swear loyalty. However, these rituals were not just signs of obedience, but also symbols of secrecy. If a member revealed the Brotherhood's secrets, They were said to be cursed with death by the Black Cross. Though some dismiss this as mere legend, some historians claim these rituals were used not only to ensure loyalty, but also to instill a psychological fear. Though the influence of the Black Cross Brotherhood seemed to fade over time, ending with growing suspicion and hostility, can such a vast network truly disappear from history so suddenly? Perhaps even today their legacy still surfaces under a different guise. Is this legacy driven by fear or by silent justice? We may never truly know, but one thing history teaches us is that secrets that grow in the dark never fully disappear. Remember, my friends, the Black Cross Brotherhood was not just a group of people. It was a reflection of humanity's greed and the security found in the shadows. To know them is to understand ourselves. Now, take a moment by the fire and reflect on these words. Ah, my dear friends, the Catholic Church, the greatest power of its time, the most unshakable authority, and the most skilled manipulator. Remember that the formidable will behind the Crusades fought not only with weapons but also with beliefs and minds. Yet the Church's role in this tale is far more complex than you may think. For it did not merely lead, it also sought to govern and control the movements in the shadows. During the Crusades, the Church was the cornerstone of an era when religious faith emerged with the sword. But my friends, remember that holding open authority was never enough. Sometimes, working in the shadows was the key to solidifying that power. That is why the Church during the Crusades aimed not only to lead open military operations, but also to influence and direct the hidden networks behind those operations. The Church's power came from its ability to weaponize the religious devotion of the people. However, there were areas where this power could not directly operate: underground organizations. These groups, though they sometimes appeared to cooperate with the Church, were in fact serving their own interests. The Church saw these groups as dangerous and at times harmful. But did it wish to completely eradicate them? This is where things become murky. The existence of these underground groups required the Church to make strategic moves. For instance, groups like the Templars could be used to support and protect the Church's authority. However, as these groups grew stronger, they began to act independently, eventually becoming a threat under the Church's own shadow. The Church needed their support, but feared losing control over them. A paradox, isn't it? One of the most prominent examples of the Church's shadow games is seen in how it attempted to manipulate these groups by swearing allegiance to the Bible and the Church. Many of their leaders operated under the direct supervision of the Church or in its name, yet many were only seemingly loyal. In some cases, Church representatives themselves would join these groups, gathering intelligence from within or directing the group's actions. But this cooperation was far from harmonious. Secret agreements, questioning of loyalty, and betrayal were inherent in these relationships. And then there was the Inquisition. My friends, here we see the darkest side of the Church. Though the Church benefited from these underground groups, once it realized they had amassed dangerous power, it began efforts to control or even eradicate them. The Inquisition's task was not only to fight heresy, but also to crush those groups threatening the Church's interests. Members of secret organizations were labeled heretics or infidels, judged, and often faced harsh punishments. Through this, the Church not only solidified its authority, but also ensured the fragmentation of secret alliances. But the Church's control mechanisms weren't solely based on the stick. The carrot was also present. In some cases, the leaders of underground groups were granted significant powers, forming new alliances in the name of the Church. Through these alliances, the Church was able to penetrate regions in the expanding Crusader territories that it otherwise could not reach. Thus, the shadows ceased to be threats and became tools. But my friends, here we face a massive question. Was the Church's control over the shadows truly absolute? Or were these groups merely pretending to bow to the Church while playing their own game? The answer to this question remains hidden in the depths of history. For watching those who dance in the shadows is always more difficult than solving someone else's game. One final thought for you. While the church sought to control the shadows, did it not in turn create a shadow within itself? Today, many legacies born from the church's dark alliances still shape our perceptions. While we may not have certainty about who they were, we can surmise their goals: power, control, and loyalty. Yet the combination of these three words is always far more complicated than it first appears. I will share more stories with you, my friends. But for now, let these pieces of information take shape in your minds. For history is a book written not only by the victors, but also by the shadows. Ah, my dear friends, have you ever heard the whisper of a secret? Sometimes they are hidden in the flicker of a candlelight, or in the echo of a dark corridor when night falls. The Crusades were not only fought on the battlefields where armies clashed, but also in the shadowy realms where whispers and secret messages roamed. This was a world where espionage and encryption had evolved into a fine and dangerous art. Espionage was not just a means of gathering information. It was the fine line between life and death. Information was the sharpest sword in winning a war. A victory won by crusader armies or underground societies often rested on a few key pieces of intelligence. Learning the enemy's battle plans, fortifications, or secret alliances provided a great strategic advantage. Therefore, spies walked in the shadows and spoke not with words, but with silence. The methods of encryption used for secret messages might seem simple by today's standards, but in those days they were ingenious and deadly effective. Secrets written in invisible ink on parchment could be revealed with candlelight or special chemicals. These messages often appeared to be a prayer or an innocent correspondence, yet in reality they contained strategic instructions. Furthermore, encryption techniques involving mathematical and linguistic methods were also developed. Some ciphers were designed in such a way that only someone with a specific page from a specific book could decipher them. Underground societies had mastered these encryption methods. Each created its own communication channels and managed to relay information without falling into the hands of enemy spies. For example, the Knights Templar could hide critical documents on the bodies of their couriers. If these documents were captured, they could only be deciphered with the correct key. If the ciphers fell into the wrong hands, the consequences could be fatal. But my friends, this world was not only populated by men. Let us now turn to the role of women in this shadowy domain. Dear friends, women. Often written on the margins of history, yet truly at the very heart of this scene, the roles of women in the underground world should never be underestimated. Secrecy, loyalty, and intelligence were their greatest weapons. While men fought on the battlefield, women were on the stage, diverting the enemy, gathering intelligence, or delivering secret messages. Who wouldn't want to be safe and secure? In some, women often played critical roles in espionage because they attracted less suspicion. The whispers exchanged in a tavern room for nights or at a noble's banquet were carried in their sharp ears. Many women carried letters and encrypted messages. What appeared to be a lace handkerchief or a simple accessory was, in fact, a carrier of strategic information. These women's roles were based on their intelligence, and the struggle they waged in the shadows was too deep to fit easily into history books. There were also symbolic figures. Many of you may have heard of the mysterious women associated with the Knights Templar. Their stories are often wrapped in legends and myths, but some were inspired by real events. Some were labeled heretics by the church, while others were known as legendary spies who infiltrated the enemy's ranks. It should not be forgotten that women were not only spies who carried messages or stole information, but they also contributed to the moral and symbolic aspects of these underground societies. Some female leaders, inspired by ancient mythology, guided these groups and used both encrypted and open messages to direct other spies. Particularly, the mysterious female figures were sometimes seen as symbols of a key or as the sole representation of loyalty. Do you think, my friends, that women were merely invisible hands, or were they the glowing torches in this shadowy world? Your questions will guide us deeper into the mysterious pages of history. But know this, to find the answer, you must listen carefully to the whispers. Now, let this story echo in your minds, and let us prepare to uncover other secrets hidden among the shadows. Ah, my dear friends, sometimes in the dark shadow of power, small yet powerful ripples emerge. Beyond the grand armies and majestic cathedrals, the period of the Crusades also harbored the silent stories of resistance movements created by ordinary people and nobles alike. These stories reflect the local struggles that Christians in Europe initiated against the Islamic forces, and they were largely hidden in the shadows. The Crusades are often told as the tale of great leaders and organized armies, but behind every conflict, there were local resistance groups working in the background. These groups represented the belief-driven struggles that determined individuals and communities waged against invaders or their supporters in secrecy. Across many regions in Europe, these local resistance movements functioned in intelligence gathering, sabotage, and sometimes direct assault. Yet, their true strength lay in their secrecy and loyalty. One of the most notable of these groups was a small underground community known as Corps de Sacre. Known as the Holy Hearts, this group was especially active in Spain and southern France. The members of Corps de Sacre consisted of both local nobles and peasants, and their purpose was to protect the Christian population in areas under Islamic rule. Among the group's members were spies disguised as farmers, information carriers who appeared to be traveling merchants, and even local priests. Sabotage was one of the most effective methods used by these local groups. Some resistance members would set fire to enemy grain stores or damage water sources. Others would block messengers or spread misinformation to disrupt the communication networks of the Islamic rulers. Deliberate misinformation could create doubt among the enemy, undermining their strategic decisions. However, these groups were not limited to physical combat. Among the resistance members were many learned individuals, scribes, and even early cryptographers. They wrote texts to inspire their people and create hope for the resurgence of the Christian world. Some manuscripts were filled with symbols that could only be read by society members, ensuring the protection of vital information. The work of the resistance groups also required the approval of the church. Some of these groups operated under banners and prayers blessed by priests. However, my friends, not all of them received support. The church's attempts to control local resistances sometimes resulted in fears of betrayal. This meant that some resistance members were under surveillance, not just by their enemies, but by their own people. But I cannot help but ask, my friends, were these secret groups merely ordinary individuals moving in the shadows, or was there something more to them? In many stories, heroic deeds take center stage. In a small town in Spain, there was a woman named Maria, a resistance leader who fought for the freedom of her people. Maria's story appears in historical records as one of a leader who infiltrated the enemy's headquarters, disguised as a contractor, successfully obtaining secret documents and then escaping. In another town in southern France, there is a young shepherd named Pierre, who secretly observed the movements of Islamic forces. With a simple flute, he would signal coded messages passing on the enemy's plans to the resistance. His story became legendary and one of the symbols of resistance among the people. Remember, these heroes' stories did not emerge from the pure evil of the enemy, but from a powerful belief in their cause. Yet their true strength lay in their selflessness, in becoming part of a cause greater than themselves. These small stories, left at the edges of history, actually form the most powerful cornerstones of the grand narratives. Now, my dear friends, I ask you, are you ready to understand these resistance movements that remained in the shadows? For the fire these resistance fighters carried in their hearts is not only one of history, but also one of the deepest secrets of the human spirit. It's not possible to mourn the dead alone. It's impossible to be alone. Ah, my dear listeners, when we think of a war being won, we often imagine swords, armor, and catapults launching from the walls. But there is another world behind the scenes, shadows filled with gold coins, quietly closing deals, and secret financial networks guarded with almost sacred precision. These, my friends, were the very mechanisms that empowered not only the armies, but also the underground societies during the Crusades. History has taught us that to keep an army alive, it requires more than just brave warriors. It needs resources. The sustainability of these resources was vital during long conflicts like the Crusades. But what about the underground organizations? How did they adapt to this complex war economy? Let's explore both their economic intelligence and their strategic thinking. First, let us recall the financial revolutions of the Knights Templar, a name familiar to all of you. Many may think of the Templars merely as warrior monks. However, the truth is that they founded one of the most innovative financial institutions in history. The Templars expertly organized the wealth from their members and benefactors, gaining the trust of kings and wealthy merchants alike. Imagine, my friends, a wise figure pulling open a scroll, guiding the listener's imagination. The system developed by the Templars is considered one of the foundations of modern banking. Any donor or traveler intending to embark on a pilgrimage could leave their gold with the Templar stronghold and receive a promissory note in return. This note was a guarantee from the Templars and could be cashed at another stronghold. Not only did this reduce the risk of transporting gold, but it also helped finance the logistical support systems for the Crusades. Through this underground financial network, the Templars became central to the economic infrastructure of Europe. The Hospitaller Knights also played a role in finance and trade, though their network was more based on commercial ventures. In particular, the markets they established next to their hospitals in the eastern Mediterranean port cities not only provided them with income, but also logistical support for their allies. The commercial networks operated by the Hospitallers were often related to the transport of medicines, precious stones, and exotic spices to Europe. However, these ventures had a darker side. At times, the Hospitallers mediated covert trade agreements with enemy forces. While negotiating with the enemy was considered contrary to religious doctrine, these agreements helped the organization both survive and expand its influence. Another striking feature of these underground societies was the creation of financial networks in what were known as secret markets. These markets were sometimes held deep within cellars or in remote mountainous regions. Trustworthy intermediaries were responsible for exchanging gold, silver, or valuables between allies in these markets. But there was an important detail. Communication via secret messaging techniques formed the backbone of these operations. Additionally, women played active roles in these financial networks. Operating without drawing attention, these individuals, disguised as traders or travelers, transported large amounts of information and at times small fortunes from one place to another. In certain areas, a group of female couriers known as the Red Birds became some of the most important figures in this underground trade network. The financial successes of these underground organizations were not just based on trade or innovative banking systems. Donations played a crucial role in ensuring their continuity. Across Europe, nobles and wealthy merchants donated large sums of gold to these organizations, both to fulfill their religious duties and to establish political connections. The Church's role in these donations cannot be denied. Thanks to the Church's approval, these organizations could proclaim that the wealth they received from donors was being used for religious purposes. Of course, my friends, this financial success sometimes made them vulnerable. The overwhelming growth of economic power increased the number of enemies these organizations had. The great wealth of the Templars eventually caught the attention of King Philip IV of France, setting in motion a process that led to their trial and dissolution. Ah, my dear friends, perhaps gold is the most dangerous weapon of all. And the fortune spinning in the shadows not only shaped the fate of a people, but the entire story of an era. This story is far from over, for in the next step, we will delve even deeper into these shadows. Ah, my dear listeners, how long can a bright star shine in the sky? The grandeur of the Knights Templar, the power of the Hospitallers, and and the shadowy influence of the Black Cross Brotherhoods, each of them has left a stamp on a period of history. But no kingdom is eternal. These organizations, living in the shadows, in due time face not only the wrath of their enemies, but also the hands that had turned a blind eye to their rise. Let me now tell you the story of the final years of the Crusades, and how the forces hidden behind these wars were silenced. This is the tale of a fire slowly fading, extinguished in the end. First, let's focus on the Knights Templar. In the early years of the Crusades, the Templars had amassed wealth and influence, becoming one of the most powerful organizations in Western Europe. But as with every rise, a fall follows swiftly. This decline often begins with greed, fear, and betrayal. On an autumn morning in 1307, King Philip IV of France set out to destroy the Templars. That morning, dozens of knights were arrested, their wealth was seized, and their names were smeared with accusations of heresy. The king's eyes were set on higher ambitions, but it was not only wealth that drove him to take this step. It was also his desire to solidify his power with the papacy. The Templars were accused of heresy, of performing secret rituals and prayers that were said to be satanic. However, behind these accusations, political motives often lurked, creating justifications to consume a great power. The execution of Grandmaster Jacques de Molay by burning in 1314 marked the official end of the Templars. Yet, it's important to remember that many Templars survived and dispersed across Europe, continuing their organization in the shadows. The Hospitallers, unlike the Templars, did not collapse suddenly. Instead, they chose to reshape themselves through the waves of time. Their power stemmed not only from military prowess, but also from diplomacy and pragmatism. The Hospitallers retreated to the island of Rhodes and began a centuries-long struggle with the Ottoman Empire. But during this struggle, their financial resources dwindled, and they lost support from the West. Eventually, in 1522, they fell to the Ottoman siege. However, they managed to be reborn as the Knights of Malta. Their story shows that destruction is not a predetermined fate. Sometimes rebirth is possible. The less-known Black Cross Brotherhoods, despite their rich history, faded with the end of the Crusades. They were neither as prominent as the Templars, nor as flexible as the Hospitallers. Thus, with the end of the Crusades, they lost the reason for their existence. Under pressure and persecution, members of these brotherhoods found it difficult to maintain their secret communities. Many clashed with the church or local nobles, leading to the internal dissolution of the group. Some members turned to individual espionage or mercenary roles, but as an organized community, their influence vanished. Ah, my dear listeners. In the beginning, both the church and the kings played a significant role in the downfall of these organizations. What had started as support gradually turned into fear and suspicion. As the church felt its power threatened, the desire to seize the wealth and prestige of these societies emerged. A campaign that had begun in the name of faith eventually turned into a political stage for both the church and the kingdoms. The underground organizations often became the losers of this game. And thus, my friends, these magical underground worlds faded one by one. Yet their traces were never completely erased. Documents sealed with gold, whispers of secrets in the rooms of nobles, and legends spread among the people kept the memories of these organizations alive. Every ending marks the beginning of something new. New powers rose from the ashes of these organizations, just as new cities are built on the ruins of old castles. Now, as I prepare you for the continuation of this tale, I ask you to ponder a question. Does a crumbled structure truly come to an end? Or does it merely take on a new form? Ah, my dear friends, every story eventually becomes a mirror. In this mirror, we see not only the past, but also the present. The tales of the Crusades and the secret societies that operated in its shadows have withstood the test of time. and left behind a legacy that extends beyond the dark curtains of this age. But what is this legacy? Symbols carved into stones? Whispers spread through legends? Or perhaps the ideas that have penetrated the hearts of people, binding us together for centuries? Even today, the cross of the Knights Templar, the colors of the Black Cross Brotherhoods, or the emblems of the Hospitallers, are not merely historical figures or objects. They have become legendary symbols. These societies, considered the ancestors of banking, organized military efforts, and healthcare services, left their marks in the very foundations of our modern world. When we speak of symbols, we must remember, a symbol is not just a shape. It tells a story, carries a soul. For example, even today, the double cross attributed to the Templars embodies the intertwined spirit of prayer and war. These symbols have, at times, been a source of inspiration, while at others they have fueled debates, conspiracy theories, and legends. The structures of secret societies, built on faith and loyalty, still echo in modern forms of organization. The codes they used, their secret oaths, and strict rules of loyalty are not just medieval nostalgia. They have inspired today's intelligence networks, closed communities, and perhaps even the hierarchical structures in our daily lives. But where do these ideas come from? Did they merely emerge from political and economic needs? Or are they a deep reflection of humanity's drive to find meaning in a chaotic world? This is just one of the questions that remain unanswered. But the true legacy, my friends, lies in the stories. The ones that are told, written down, and mysteriously passed down from generation to generation. These organizations may have been forgotten with time, but their legends continue to live on, evolving into myths that retain their weight with each new telling. Even today, many believe that the Templars still operate in the depths of Europe, continuing their mystical rituals. Some claim that the Black Cross Brotherhoods have deep roots in noble families and helped shape modern Europe. And of course, the whispers echoing through the dark corridors of the church might still be influencing today's Vatican politics. These kinds of legends not only engage the historian's mind, but also stir the imagination of the people. And so the legacy that remains is this: symbols hidden among stones, whispers carried by the wind, stories written on paper and etched by the pen. The past of the Crusades reflects not only a historical perspective, but also reveals how many worlds people have created around what they choose to believe. But what about you, my friends? You are the ones who will carry these stories into the future. As long as there is someone who remembers the meaning of every symbol and every story, no legacy is ever truly lost. My dear friends, our time has come to an end. It has been a great honor to welcome you here and to explore these forgotten corridors together. But like every journey, this story closes here. Remember, history is not just the tale of those who lived in the past. It is also our story. In every legend told, there is a bit of truth, a bit of hope. Now take this story with you as you continue your own journey. Perhaps one day you too will find your own legacy waiting to be discovered in the forgotten corners of history. Farewell, my dear friends. Until we meet again in the next story,